Welcome to the CBIA BizCast. I'm your host, Ali Warshavsky, and today on our podcast, we have the owner and president of Rebel Interactive, Allison Minutillo. Allison is here to speak about climbing the ranks to become a leader of the company, and she has some advice for young entrepreneurs. Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you, especially leading up to our When Women Lead conference, which is about a month from now, where we'll be listening and speaking to leaders like you. And I want to start this off by speaking about Rebel Interactive. Where are you based? And tell us a little bit about what you do for your clients.
So we are a digital marketing agency. We are currently based out of Southington, Connecticut, but we just bought a 25,000 square foot property in Cheshire, Connecticut, which is an enormous project that we are learning every single day. And I was just joking to somebody the other day that I have never learned this much in such a short period of time, other than motherhood, I guess, than doing a construction project. So we are eyeballs deep into that project, and we're moving in hopefully around Memorial Day, but we're very, very thrilled for that. And Rebel really does all of the things you'd think an agency does. So from business strategy and consulting to branding, to logo design, to website builds and paid media campaigns, all in between that, all the nooks and crannies of digital marketing. But we've always been digital marketers first. So it's our core DNA that keeps us here and thriving.
I think it's so interesting that you are expanding to a bigger place when a lot of places are closing their offices, having employees work remote or hybrid. You know, in a remote world, how are you expanding? Why are you expanding to this new building?
It's a great question. So long before the pandemic ever happened, we have always been a hybrid company. We always found that was the way that we got the best out of our employees was give people flexibility to work from home on the days they choose and ask them to come in the office 2 days a week. That kept the vibe right, the culture right, collaboration going and running, whiteboards filled, while still trusting everybody and having accountability for our staff to just have days where they get stuff done, right? And so we've always strived to go back to that. And throughout COVID, we had periods where everybody's home, but we also opened the office and made it a place where when people were just pulling their hair out at home and couldn't take it anymore by themselves and needed a creative outlet and needed their peers and their family, honestly, we just made it a choice. And throughout that choice, we saw a lot of people come back. And we realized that part of what makes our business special and the way that we're growing so fast are the people coming together to create magical ideas, new strategies, challenge each other's perspectives, have hard conversations. And that stuff is just very difficult in a Zoom world. So we're thrilled. We know we are not the norm when it comes to this, buying a building during this time, but just like the housing market, we lucked out on this building and it was the right investment at the right time for us.
And speaking of not the norm, I should take that back. Sometimes it's normal to climb the ranks of a company, but you really had a very speedy progression and started in a role that maybe many wouldn't have thought that would end up having you as owner. Let's talk about that. When did you join the company? And then when you joined, did you ever dream you would be the owner and president of it?
So short answer, no. Never dreamed of the position that I'm in right now. I'm very, very humbled by it and very grateful. I started as the director of content marketing and social media here, and that wasn't even classic in my background. I really grew up through the ranks of client services and account management, and then evolved into strategy roles and new business, but always on the front lines of client service. And when I shifted to Rebel, I actually, the minute I met Bryn, I knew that he was somebody I needed to work with. It didn't really matter about the role. I was ready for a change in my career, similar to a lot of people during this pandemic. You're kind of questioning everything. You're questioning your job and your future and the path you're on, the trajectory. Do you like who you are at work? Is that the best version of you? And in my case, I didn't. I needed a fresh start. I needed a place where I could come to work and separate work and friendships. I needed to be in a place where I was empowered by somebody and who said yes to my crazy ideas and visions. Cause I always knew I had something to give more and I wanted to do more, but I wasn't at places in my life and in my career at that time that said yes to those things as fast or as much as I wanted them to. So when I met Bryn, I just knew it based on the questions he was asking me, and the role I was trying to fill. I created a team. I was the first person on that team. That quickly grew and kind of grew and grew and grew and just started morphing into the things that I was really, really good at to kind of get to the place I am today.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome. And now you are working with clients like Lyman Orchard, so something pretty local. But I also saw that you're working with clients like Delta. What type of work what type of companies are you partnering with locally to help them with their digital marketing? And then what are some of the ones that you're proud of that maybe aren't local, but are a big reach?
That's a great question. So we are industry agnostic, meaning we don't focus like some agencies have core disciplines and there's a lot of strategy in that and there's real reasons why they do that. For us, we find that our most creative ideas come from the left field industries where you're applying something you learned in the roofing contractor world to something in higher education and vice versa. There's also a lot of businesses that we work with locally that projects move a lot faster than enterprise level website builds or paid media campaigns. So the speed with which you see your work in the market or in the wild, like we like to say, is empowering and it fuels your creativity. So we don't like to keep projects that are all one size fits all or every single thing is this giant year-long project because it starts to become difficult to keep staff engaged and excited. We like to get this healthy mix. So a lot of our industries, we range from everything from education to B2B to consumer packaged goods, to whiskey brands. I'm sitting in a room where there's a whole case of whiskey for an upcoming photo shoot, to healthcare and e-commerce and all the ins and outs, nonprofits, they all couldn't be more different. But what you find in marketing strategy is insert different business problem, insert different target audience, insert different client challenges and political landscape, and you've got a similar recipe. And there's a lot of things that you can learn if you don't pigeonhole yourself into, I only know the healthcare space and that's it. There's a lot of value in that, but there's also value in thinking outside the box and applying things from the restaurant industry that might work in that field.
Yeah, very broad range. And I'm sure, again, like it crosses over. The things you learn can help you, whether it's a bigger brand or a smaller one. You're doing all this while managing two young kids or, raising them. How do you make that possible? It's an overwhelming world we live in right now. And then to be the owner of a company and have two young kids, do you have a strategy for that as well? Like you go into your work day?
Oh, I wish I did. Very supportive husband. He also has an extremely stressful job at ESPN. So we are two very, very busy, but very driven people that this is all we've ever wanted. So to complain about it and stress about it too much is like, well, what did we work for then? So we tag team and we parent together. We try to do the best we possibly can logistically for each other while being present for our kids and setting boundaries on work and leaving at a certain time for daycare pickup and drop off and trying to make time for all the things that we want. Some days it's prettier than others. A lot of days it involves really early mornings and really late nights. Last night I was on the couch till 1:30. Don't tell my husband. But it's doing the things that we love. I was listening to podcast episodes of our own that I couldn't find time during the day. So it's like, when you're really in that privileged position where you get to do every day the things that you could never dream about doing for a job, then you make it work. You find the time for yourself to run out for a nail appointment. My nails are awful right now. Or you find the time to be at t-ball practice for your kid, or you find the time to be at that 8 a.m. meeting. But I think with the right support system, both at work and in leadership, your friend circle and your family, you can do it all. It's a choice.
So for women listening to this who might have young kids and just big dreams themselves that they're not ready to put aside, they want to see them through, what would be your advice be to them?
Give yourself some grace. It's so easy to dish out advice. And yet I need to listen to this back and give it to myself. Make time for yourself, because what everybody needs around you in leadership positions is your best self. And sometimes that means being selfish, and going for that treadmill run, even if you don't want to move your legs, or whatever your outlet is that makes you your best you've got to do it, and you've got to choose that, even though other things may seem more important. There's nothing more important than fueling that energy of yourself, because that's really what everybody wants from you once you get into these leadership positions. The other piece that I would tell other young women is believe that you can, and stand up for what you believe in, and constantly be your own advocate. It's like in healthcare, when you go to the doctor, if you sit back and you don't say anything, how would that doctor know what symptoms you have or what you think is wrong, right? It's very similar. I feel like one of the things I was blessed with was courage. I just always had the courage to stand up with conviction, but with poise and professionalism for my ideas. And when I was getting a brick wall ahead of me, where it just felt like someone was doing it either because they felt threatened, or they had pitched an idea and they wanted there's more. There was something there where they were trying to hold me back. Well, that's kind of when rebels go around, right? But there are ways to speak with conviction in a way that gets your ideas across effectively and gets to the next level effectively and brings people along with you. So it is possible. It's not a perfect linear journey. So stop asking for one, future generations. Live with it and try and gain the experience and listen to those around you who are trying to tell you things. That's all the things that I wish I had known back then that I learned throughout this journey.
Well, hopefully someone listening will be able to take that away from this conversation. What is your advice? We spoke about women who might have children, but what about young entrepreneurs? Because you are one yourself, right? And there's a lot of people graduating college. We have a labor shortage, but some people, and I think one of the reasons why we have it is because they want to do their own thing. They want to create their own company, create their own path. How do they do that?
It's not as easy as it looks.
Definitely not.
Really think about it. I mean, it's not to say don't do it. It's to think, do you have the grit and the thick skin and the determination and the diligence to do it every single day? Every day. It's just like parenting. You can't just drop your kids off if you're having a bad week. That is your job. That is your responsibility. And I think we as a culture are very short-sighted now and don't understand the time and the emotional investment that really goes into being an entrepreneur. I think people see the shiny objects and the flashy cars and the money and the Netflix series of the world and the sexy side of entrepreneurialism. But what they don't see are the grinding it out hard days and the conversations that no one else wants to have. And the only place for people to escalate is to you. And that pressure is a lot to handle. And I'm not saying that it's, like I said before, it's not pretty every single day, but it's a choice that you have to make. So you have to really think, at least from my perspective, you have to really think about what it is that you want before you just go pursue that idea. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't necessarily my first instinct a long time ago. I tell you that much.
And understanding that being in a position of leadership is a lot harder than it looks. It doesn't just come with money, and it might not come with money at all, but it comes with a lot of hard decisions and tough conversations. I think that's underestimated a lot. We spoke a lot about you and managing your work-life balance and your drive. But what about, marketing? We had this whole pandemic. We have constantly heard from other industries of how it's changed the way they do things. Has it changed the way you do things? Like, as you mentioned, you were already on a hybrid work model before it became the cool thing to do. But in terms of the actual marketing and digital marketing and producing content, has that changed at all?
Yes, incredibly so. We were one of those industries that benefited from the pandemic, luckily, knock on wood. Um, Meaning, as businesses were failing, and as in the beginning of 2020, if you could put yourself back in that dark place, businesses weren't sure what's going to happen, and their doors were closing, and places that didn't have e-commerce were now scrambling to get an e-commerce store stood up, and over and over and over and over again, right? And they turned to digital marketing because that was the only thing that we could touch and help save our businesses of the United States, right? And so in that, we had this sprint in the beginning of the pandemic. But because what I was saying before, that we'd always been hybrid, we were ready as an organization. We didn't have that couple weeks glitch where everybody's fumbling over Zoom and trying to figure out video conferencing and getting your software right. We've always been a no workstations, pick up your laptop and move to the next open seat. So we were very used to functioning, and we were actually very good at functioning in all different parts of the state. And so when that hit, we were fast. We were closing business right and left. That was the early part of our trajectory of our business growth. And throughout that time, now fast forward 2 years, it's been really interesting hearing clients describe how the pandemic has affected their businesses. And so from a marketing perspective, you have to adapt the strategies that you're recommending to them based on all those different unique circumstances, because the tactics and strategies that used to work may not work anymore. And you need to be able to innovate and change and constantly challenge status quo, which is what we believe it truly means to be a rebel. So our value proposition, our branding that we had built long time ago, all of that, the industry we're in a red hot industry, in high demand. So all of those things were kind of serendipitous for us, and accelerated far beyond what we had ever envisioned.
Can you give an example of how it's changed, just for anyone who's not familiar with how the industry works?
Sure. So as an example, I'll give you a client example. I won't name the name, but I was just talking about it this morning with somebody where you wouldn't even think this, but this particular client has accounting and finance test prep material for things like CPA exam or CFA exam. And think about SAT prep, right? You might get an SAT tutor, you might get a physical book, and you might go to a course or two. It's very similar for those higher credentialed exams. But COVID shut down CPA test centers. So literally the entire world of accounting stopped getting new CPAs in 2020. So now think about that business, the ripple effect on that marketer's business, this client's business. They can't drive people to the CPA exam. There is no CPA exam logistically. It's things like that are that simple. Just because they can't schedule a test means their entire business halts, and you need to quickly pivot with that client to say, okay, what are other strategies at play? What are the other assets, relationships, different things that we have done or things that we've wanted to do that aren't reliant on getting a person to go take a test? What are the strategies at play that we can put in practice now while we wait for that industry to bounce back, if that makes sense? So it's very scenario specific, but it affected everybody in the most interesting ways. And we need to understand that. But the way that we do that is just listen, ask really hard questions, and just get clients to talk to us as if we're in it with them. They need us and we need them, right? So instead of giving them a sales pitch, just talk to us. Let's lay the hard stuff out there and let's figure out how to overcome some of these challenges. Some of them, quite frankly, can't be overcome. Some of these businesses will not bounce back, but the ones who are willing to take advice and think about things differently and implement change and aren't afraid of it and just embrace it are the ones who are A, the best clients, but B, the ones who survive in the end.
That is fascinating. I never would have thought that about CPA exams not being able to be taken during the pandemic and how to pivot, right, from selling like a big book. Speaking of changing things, what's next for Rebel? Any big changes or any, besides the new building, that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so we have a lot of ventures at play in the works in our building that we are constantly bringing to market. One a couple months ago was a software as a service company called a SaaS-based company that we recently launched called Rebelware. And those were solutions for ourselves to make us work more efficiently that we are now giving back to small to mid-sized businesses like ours that dealt with pain points like time tracking and recruiting process and all of the things that were just so painful for us. So that's one example. We launched a clothing line a couple months back called Rebel Movement. We've got our building and a podcast studio right in the building. So I'm not in this room recording with you, but a beautiful studio that will be rentable space. So a lot of different things at play because we truly believe with the people that we have here, the culture that we have, where it's extremely empowering and challenging everybody to be their best selves every day. Far less important about the work that we do, but more about being better humans who push ourselves and challenge each other and be there for one another, then sky's the limit on the things that we could bring to market from a business standpoint.
Well, Allison, it's been a pleasure having you on the BizCast. I think you offered so much great advice for me to take and as well as anyone else listening. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It was wonderful.
And thank you for listening to our BizCast. You can listen and subscribe to our podcast on Apple, YouTube, SoundCloud, and for more episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.